It is, however, a discordancy that can never be resolved by any merely medical test. A good example of the impossibility of holding strictly to the medical tests is seen in the theory of the pathological causation of genius promulgated by recent authors. Genius, says Dr. Moreau, is but one of many branches of the neuropathic tree. Genius, says Dr. Lombroso, is a symptom of hereditary degeneration of the epileptoid variety and is allied to moral insanity. Whenever a man's life, writes Mr. Nesbit, is at once sufficiently illustrious and recorded with sufficient fullness to be the subject of a profitable study, he inevitably falls into the morbid category. And it is worthy of remark that, as a rule, the greater the genius, the greater the unsoundness. Now, do these authors, after having succeeded in establishing to their own satisfaction that the works of genius are fruits of disease, consistently proceed thereupon to impugn the value of the fruits? Do they deduce a new spiritual judgment from the new doctrine of existential conditions? Do they frankly forbid us to admire the productions of genius from now onwards, and say outright that no neuropath can ever be a revealer of new truth? No. Their immediate spiritual instincts are too strong for them here, and hold their own against inferences which, in mere love of logical consistency, medical materialism ought to be only too glad to draw. One disciple of the school, indeed, has striven to impugn the value of works of genius in a wholesale way. Such works of contemporary art, namely, as he himself is unable to enjoy, and they are many, by using medical arguments. But for the most part, the masterpieces are left unchallenged, and the medical line of attack either confines itself to secular productions, as everyone admits to be intrinsically eccentric, or else addresses itself exclusively to religious manifestations. And then it is because the religious manifestations have been already condemned, because the critic dislikes them on internal or spiritual grounds. In the natural sciences and industrial arts, it never occurs to anyone to try to refute opinions by showing up their author's neurotic constitution. Opinions here are invariably tested by logic and by experiment, no matter what they may be their author's neurological type. It should be no otherwise with religious opinions. Their values can only be ascertained by spiritual judgments directly passed upon them, the judgments based on our own immediate feeling primarily, and secondarily on what we can ascertain of their experiential relations to our moral needs and to the rest of what we hold as true. Immediate luminousness, in short, philosophical reasonableness, and moral helpfulness are the only available criteria. St. Teresa may have had the nervous system of the placidest cow, and it would not now save her theology if the trial of the theology by these other tests should show it to be contemptible. And conversely, if her theology can stand these other tests, it will make no difference how hysterical or nervously off-balance St. Teresa may have been when she was with us here below. You see that at bottom, we are thrown back upon the general principles by which the empirical philosophy has always contended that we must be guided in our search for truth. Dogmatic philosophies have sought for tests for truth which might dispense us from appealing to the future, some direct mark, by noting which we can be protected immediately and absolutely, now and forever, against all mistakes. Such has been the darling dream of philosophic dogmatists. It is clear that the origin of the truth would be an admirable criterion of this sort, if only the various origins could be discriminated from one another from this point of view. And the history of dogmatic opinion shows that origin has always been a favorite test. Origin in immediate intuition, origin in pontifical authority, origin in supernatural revelation, as by vision, hearing, or unaccountable impression, origin in direct possession by a higher spirit, expressing itself in prophecy and warning, origin in automatic utterance, generally, These origins have been stock warrants for the truth of one opinion after another, which we find represented in religious history. The medical materialists are therefore only so many belated dogmatists, neatly turning the tables on their predecessors by using the criterion of origin in a destructive instead of an accreditive way. They are effective with their talk of pathological origin only so long as supernatural origin is pleaded by the other side, and nothing but the argument from origin is under discussion. But the argument from origin has seldom been used alone, for it is too obviously insufficient. Dr. Maudsley is perhaps the cleverest of the rebutters of supernatural religion on grounds of origin, yet he finds himself forced to write, "What right have we to believe nature under any obligation to do her work by means of complete minds only? She may find an incomplete mind a more suitable instrument for a particular purpose. It is the work that is done, and the quality in the worker by which it was done, that is alone the moment, and it may be no great matter from a cosmical standpoint if in other qualities of character he was singularly defective, if indeed he were hypocrite, adulterer, eccentric, or lunatic. Home we come again, then, to the old and last resort of certitude, namely the common assent of mankind, or of the competent by instruction and training among mankind. In other words, not its origin, but the way in which it works on the whole is Dr. Maudsley's final test of a belief. This is our own empiricist criterion, and this criterion, the stoutest insisters on supernatural origin have always also been forced to use in the end. Among the visions and messages, some have always been too patently silly. Among the trances and convulsive seizures, some have been too fruitless for conduct and character to pass themselves off as significant, still less as divine. In the history of Christian mysticism, the problem how to discriminate between such messages and experiences as were really divine miracles, and such others as the demon in his malice was able to counterfeit, thus making the religious person twofold more the child of hell he was before, has always been a difficult one to solve, needing all the sagacity and experience of the best directors of conscience. In the end, it has to come to our empiricist criterion. By their fruits ye shall know them, not by their roots. Jonathan Edwards' treatise on religious affections is an elaborate working out of this thesis. The roots of a man's virtue are inaccessible to us. No appearances whatever are infallible proofs of grace. Our practice is the only sure evidence, even to ourselves, that we are genuinely Christians. Informing a judgment of ourselves now, Edwards writes, we should certainly adopt that evidence which our supreme judge will chiefly make use of when we come to stand before him at the last day. There is not one grace of the Spirit of God, of the existence of which, in any professor of religion, Christian practice is not the most decisive evidence. The degree in which our experience is productive of practice shows the degree in which our experience is spiritual and divine. Catholic writers are equally emphatic. The good dispositions which a vision or voice or other apparent heavenly favor leave behind them are the only marks by which we may be sure they are not possible deceptions of the tempter. Says St. Teresa, like imperfect sleep, which, instead of giving more strength to the head, doth but leave it more the exhausted, the result of mere operations of the imagination is but to weaken the soul. Instead of nourishment and energy, she reaps only lassitude and disgust, whereas a genuine heavenly vision yields to her a harvest of ineffable spiritual riches and an admirable renewal of bodily strength. I alleged these reasons to those who so often accuse my visions of being the work of the enemy of mankind and the sport of my imagination. I showed them the jewels which the divine hand had left with me, They were my actual dispositions. All those who knew me saw that I was changed. My confessor bore witness to the fact. This improvement, palpable in all respects, far from being hidden, was brilliantly evident to all men. As for myself, it was impossible to believe that if the demon were its author, he could have used, in order to lose me and lead me to hell, an expedient so contrary to his own interests as that of uprooting my vices and filling me with masculine courage and other virtues instead. For I saw clearly that a single one of these visions was enough to enrich me with all that wealth